Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture. This episode is a continuation of the episode that I focused on how to analyze good design from crafts to architecture, focusing on the timeless principles by Vitruvius of Venustas, Feminitas, and Utilitas. Now, in this modern day and age, we need to actually interpret what the meaning is in terms of what exactly is Utilitas and why do I jump into thinking that it's about function. There have been other definition of Utilitas in terms of commodity and functionality. And I've been reading, and I'd like to get a quote here from the RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, and the article. And I'm going to give some commentary on this. On the study that I did to compare commodity and functionality with disability. So all in all, we're talking about disability as well, because functionality must include all people. So there's a quote here, integrating commodity and function, where it says modern inclusive architecture dictates that functionality must never be separated from comfort and dignity. True universal design ensures that a commodity like an elegant sloping entryway or a seamless floor plan serves both aesthetic comfort for all guests and essential physical functionality for wheelchair users simultaneously. So we're just going to focus on that, and the article that is linked to that quote on accessible architecture that you can find on the riba.org website. So I'm going to go through this article and also give comments with regard to, it all relates back to the analysis on good design. And through this definition or principles of design by Vitruvius, Utilitas, Venustas, and Feminitas. So when we talk about Utilitas, we're talking about functionality, and is that what Vitruvius meant? But I wouldn't think so, because that is like 100 BC, and now we are here in the 21st century with advances in technology and a lot of other stuff. So how does it mean to us, this principle? And another reason why I want to do this episode is because disabled activists were interested with this podcast, the first podcast episode. They seem to find this fascinating. So I'm just going to continue here with the article. Accessible Architecture, How Today's Inclusive Spaces Can Help Solve 200 Years of Accessible Design Challenges. So we're looking back in time. So in this latest article, revisiting their collections, Ed Warner, founder and CEO of the accessible design business, Motion Spot and Government Access Ambassador for Accessible Products and Spaces, looks at how modern-day inclusive principles can help solve the decades of accessible design challenges evidenced in the collections. The barriers to disabled people's access to the built environment are as old as architecture itself. Material in RIBA collections documents 200 years of these challenges and solutions over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries. There is a diagram by Evans and Shalabs, more of a drawing actually. They're designed for a home for the physically disabled at 48 Boundary Road, London, with an axonometric view of an accessible physiotherapy pool with wheelchair ramp in 1973. Lovely indeed, the drawing. I will also put the link of this article in the thumbnail for this episode. So Evans and Shalab's 1973 drawing for a home for the physically disabled at 48 Boundary Road, London, features an accessible physiotherapy pool with a wheelchair ramp. The residence was later converted into a home for the elderly. In the 1970s, disability activists Ken and Maggie Davis formed a cooperative to build the UK's first fully integrated housing complex with carefully designed flats on the ground floor for the disabled and flats on the first floor for the able-bodied. The resulting Grove Road housing scheme in Sutton in Ashfield was designed by Wyvern Design Group and became a groundbreaking blueprint for accessible residential design. Back in 1931, architect Gordon Cullen was raising awareness of how design could better support people with difficult physical needs, for instance, suggesting that cupboards or meters for the elderly should be no higher than 6 feet. But these advances in awareness of accessible design were hard-won. The Victorian approach to design for disability, widely documented in our collections, involved the widespread construction of asylums that segregated many disabled people from society, providing very poor living conditions in often highly clinical and institutional settings. Full James and Wallace 1852 lunatic asylum in Monmouthshire or Shire, reproduced in The Builder, highlights the dehumanizing effects of these institutions. The seemingly picturesque view of the exterior belies the clinical nature of the institution conveyed in the corresponding plan. It looks very institutional indeed. The designs by Full James and Waller for a lunatic asylum at Abergavenny, Monmouthshire. Okay. Whilst our modern day building designs, construction techniques, and product designs look unrecognizable from those captured in the early material, it is a sad reflection on our society that almost 200 years on, disabled people are still experiencing many of the same challenges in the built environment. Where adjustments have been made for disabled people, the resulting environments can often feel like second-class spaces with clinical-looking products more suited to Victorian institutions than beautiful contemporary buildings. Thankfully, there are signs that things are changing. The more progressive architects and designers in our industry realize that the best environments and products are accessible for all. They are using evidence-based research and innovative design techniques, products, and technology to make these spaces and the products within them inclusive for everyone. What is driving this change? A greater focus on the social model of disability, whereby there is an acceptance that it is the environment that is the disabling factor, rather than the medical model of disability that sees a person's impairment or condition as causing challenge or barrier in a space. Approaches are also changing as the design community gains a better understanding of the needs of disabled people. Quote, "Nothing about us without us," unquote, has been a mantra adopted by accessibility organizations over the years to ensure that any decisions taken about disabled people involve close working with inclusive design specialists and people with the lived experience of disability who can be involved in the early stages of a design process. So we have a picture here, a group of people, and a couple of them are in a wheelchair, and one with a manual wheelchair, one with a motorized wheelchair, looking at drawings that are pasted on the wall, drawings that look like a building with three-dimensional images. And it says down there, a motion spot and rider architecture design focus group. So let me continue. I seem to be wanting to read the text rather than commenting because it is important to note from this article by Motion Spot and Rider Architecture Design of how things have changed. Mindsets are also changing that design for disability is about providing wheelchair access. For too long, the industry has treated access as a tick box exercise by demonstrating that a building is accessible because it has a level access entrance, doorways that are the necessary width, and the ground floor wheelchair accessible toilet. In the UK, only 8% of the 14 million disabled people are wheelchair users. So the most inclusive developments are those that consider the needs of wheelchair users, and 92% of people who may have other, physical, sensory, or cognitive disability, including neurodiverse conditions such as autism, dyspraxia, and ADHD. When architects and designers understand who they are designing for and blend function with form to create beautiful, accessible spaces, the result is a building that's more desirable for a broader range of users. Several projects are now reaching completion across the UK that demonstrate this successful inclusive design approach and innovative product mix. So, some projects, as I mentioned, and I'm just glancing down here. Mention of a hotel in Manchester, that is Hotel Brooklyn, has created 18 accessible bedrooms and bathrooms with clever hidden design features such as ceiling track hoists, concealed in a wardrobe, and bathrooms that can flexibly adapt to suit guests' needs through innovative removable grab rail and shower seat technology. So they also talk about office and hotel environments. So saying that at the end of this article, their success is also helping to change the mindset. In the industry, that accessible design is broader than just providing wheelchair access, and that aesthetics don't have to be compromised when designing beautiful, accessible spaces. This had been of a concern, shall we say, in the even 20 years ago, especially when in the UK you had an Anti-Discrimination Act, the Disability Discrimination Act. After that, you have the Equality and Opportunities Commission. But what I'm trying to say is that for historical buildings or historic buildings in the UK is a bigger challenge. And for a new build, you could build it accessible as much as you want. but for historic buildings, you need to also not change a lot of things because of the historical or architectural significance of an architecture feature that you can't really change, and you need to have alternatives to access the building. And sometimes you can't add a lift because of the damage to the structure. So we're going back into this idea of functionality, and this article gives us an idea of inclusive environment and how they would also show how they incorporate inclusivity from the very beginning to execute, such as the Hotel Brooklyn in Manchester, designed by Stevenson Studio, Squid Incorporation, and Motion Spot. I'm looking at a photo of a hotel room, which has low accessible shelves, and you don't have to have, shall we say, too many, shall we say, doors or closets. You have to open the shelves with doors or sliding door. You can just leave that open and easily accessible. I can see an accessible bathroom at the end with a wide door. And he did mention in the article, they did mention the article of how they want to include not only physical disabled persons' needs, but others as well, those with sensory disabilities or cognitive disabilities. And there are principles in universal design that help people to find their way or negotiate the space. Three things: accessibility, safety, and usability in general helps to put us into focus on how to make it more functional with those 7 principles of universal design, such as low physical effort. That's why you don't have like too many openings. What I mean is doors to close the closet, the sliding type, or even the one that you opened, because you give a choice for people to easily use the furniture and the space around. You think about how people would use the space because it is a hotel room, what they need to be doing, in and out of that space, having good shower, a good bed, a good sleep. And it's, of course, linked to the type of building. If it's an office building with open plan spaces with cubicles or meeting area, there are those needs. And I myself did a access audit of an office building, and the biggest issue is the use of access card and it being too high for some of the people who have who are short in stature to reach. And some things are more critical because of the functionality relates to the job function or what they do when they use the type of accommodation. Disability, going back to this question about commodity and functionality, is what we're interested in earlier. And integrating commodity and function, where functionality should not be separated from comfort and dignity. we often skip over the topic of dignity, because dignity is everything, really, in terms of how, that's another point that I'd like to raise. When the economic lens of Amartya Sen's capability approach, the extra costs of functionality, I'm trying to quote here, the extra costs of functionality because standard commodities do not inherently provide equity. Individuals with disabilities face a steep economic tax. They must acquire a customized commodities modification, specialized tech, just to reach the baseline functionality that others achieve naturally. I mean, in illustrating the example of the office that we audited, where the most critical problem was identified to be the access card that is too high for those with low of stature. It's just that of people with physical disabilities that are the employees of this office, who are in a wheelchair or have problem with the heavy glass doors, have problem with reaching to these access card points to open the door quickly. They don't get in time to be in a position where there is opposite of the low physical effort. They have to use a high physical effort to do so, and it could injure their shoulders or or make them use unnecessary force that would injure their shoulders or arms. So when Sen's talking about this capability approach, it is not equitable. There is no equity for disabled person as a staff in that office to get into the baseline functionality like everybody else. Having said that, a friend of mine who was working as a remisier in another office, this is from her experience, because the office building was constructed in an era where the accessibility laws was not applied. So they provided accessible car park, which leads to the lift to the ground level, and then at the office area, which has problems with heights of different heights, they managed to put a ramp and managed to make an accessible toilet for that remisier. They give respect to her because then she could perform or even outperform other people, other staff, because she has gone beyond the baseline functionality in order to be at par, be having equity. So equity is a very important factor in analyzing whether people are in a level playing field and that the environment is accommodated for them. So you see, when we talk about Utilitas, we think about utility, obviously, and we jump into commodity and we jump into functionality, and that there is, if you look in economic lens by Amartya Sen, with the universal design and architecture together, you can see that it is about welfare economics. A commodity is any good or resource, money, a wheelchair, an assistive device. Well, functionality referred to as functioning is the actual state of being or doing that a person achieves, such as being mobile, being nourished, participating in community life. And transformation of a commodity into real functionality is heavily dictated by disability. So just now I was talking about the extra costs of functionality. There are also other points that they could be discussed as well. Like the conversion handicap. A non-disabled person and a disabled person might possess the exact same commodity, which is a standard bicycle or a fixed amount of money. However, due to physical and social barriers, the disabled person cannot convert that commodity into the same level of actual functionality. If it's a standard bicycle, they keep falling off of the bicycle, so they have to modify it, obviously. So economically, you can also look at this. And architecture is not far away from economics. Architecture is not far away from beauty, from it being able to be stand up on its own in a structure system, and also in functionality. So, okay, we get to understand about it in an economic lens today. And there could be an interesting conversation about this later on, a proper dialogue or a proper episode on this. But for now, I'm just reintroducing that timeless design principles by Vitruvius in this modern day and times, coupled with the RIBA article that I mentioned just now, looking into the history of disability and accessibility in the UK, and also going into refining or trying to expand on the definition of utilitas by looking at the other words that is interpreted from utilitas, which is commodity and functionality. So with that, I'd like to finish this episode. Thank you for listening.